This moving clip of a four-engined bomber falling from the sky has been used in many TV documentaries to represent the sacrifices made by Allied bomber crews in World War II. But what's the story behind it? Did any of the crew survive? The wing leader team set out to see if it was possible to identify the bomber that fell to Earth. The aircraft clearly has four engines and twin tails, which could suggest a Lancaster or Halifax from the RAF. But a closer look at the long, thin wings shows us that it is in fact a consolidated B-24 Liberator. The Liberator was the companion to the Flying Fortress and was used extensively by the US 8th Air Force from bases in England during World War II. Although not as famous as the Fortress, the Liberator was in fact produced in larger numbers than any other aircraft in the United States Army Air Force, with over 18,000 being built. So, would it be possible to identify this 1 in 18,000?
So the first things we needed to establish were where and when. If we could find out the location, if we could find out the date, then that would mean we should be able to find out which aircraft it was and who was flying it.
The scenery and church steeple in the background suggested it was probably at one of the 8th Air Force bases in East Anglia. But a closer look in the background showed what appeared to be a bubble-canopied fighter aircraft, a British Hawker Typhoon in fact. Could this have been filmed from an RAF airfield? If so, then there was every likelihood that the footage was taken by the RAF Film Production Unit whilst filming Typhoons. A search through some of their reels found the breakthrough the team needed. Whilst filming Typhoons at Airfield B5, the Film Production Unit had captured footage of a Liberator performing a bizarre series of loops and stall turns before crashing to the ground. It was the same piece of footage.
So what was B5? Well, when an airfield only had a letter and a number, what it meant was that it was on the continent and that the Allies didn't want to name the local village for obvious security reasons. Now the B prefix tells us that it was an RAF operated airfield, and the 5 tells us that it was the 5th airfield or advanced landing ground to be built after D-Day. Now with that in mind, it had to be very close to the Normandy beaches. And sure enough, a quick search revealed that B5 was next to the village of Le Fresnay-Camilly, about 6 miles inland from the coast. And if you look at the village church on Google Street View, you can see it is indeed the same place.
By lining up the angles in this still from the film with the aerial photo of the airfield, it is even possible to work out where the cameraman was standing when he took the dramatic footage. The B-24 must have missed the village by just a few hundred yards.
So the team had the where, but now we needed the when.
B-5 became operational just a week after D-Day, as the Allies established a foothold in Normandy. It hosted several Typhoon squadrons that were flying ground attack missions against the retreating German forces. The team therefore decided to ask wing leader, author, and Typhoon expert Chris Thomas if he could find any mention of this incident at B-5. Chris searched through dozens and dozens of records, and then found gold. In the operations record book for 121 Wing, he found the following entry for the 10th of August 1944.
By far the most exciting event of the day occurred just after lunch. Strange sounds were heard overhead, presently seen to come from a Liberator, the entire crew of which, to judge from the array of parachutes, had bailed out. From 7,000 feet, the aircraft descended in a series of breathtaking dives and stalls, the roar of its fall being punctuated by some Mustangs who tried to master its progress by firing their guns into the plane. It eventually crashed into an open field, but never in the hands of a pilot can this type have been put through such aerobatics. The fact that it held together was in itself a tribute to the design.
So the acrobatic display was performed by the Liberator itself. With no pilot at the controls, the aircraft just flew on its own, picking up speed in a dive which, in turn, caused the nose to rise and make the aircraft climb again. As the airspeed dropped off, the B-24 stalled and dived for the ground again, repeating this sequence at least 3 or 4 times before smashing into the ground. No wonder the observers on the ground looked worried as the pilotless B-24 flew towards them at the end of the sequence.
With the date confirmed, we could then check on B-24 losses for the 10th of August 1944, and there was only one.
B-24H Liberator, tail number 41-28648, from the 448th Bomb Group. Its pilot, Parry T. Ferry from Austin, Texas, had been assigned to the 448th Bomb Group based at Seething, Norfolk, on the 26th of July 1944. 2 weeks later, he and his crew took off with 30 other B-24s to bomb a fuel dump southeast of Paris. German flak badly damaged Ferry's B-24, and he decided to head to the nearest part of Allied-occupied France rather than risk a long journey home. Once over friendly territory, all of the crew bailed out. Only one man was injured, Corporal Charles Wolfe, who broke a leg on landing. The crew returned to England and continued on operations before all 10 men returned to America when the war in Europe ended. So the story had a happy ending. The doomed bomber was empty and his crew lived to fight another day. Not only that, the pilot decided to send his parachute home to Cleveland to his fiancée Rosemary, who made it into her wedding dress. They were married on the 27th of July 1946, just 2 years after that wedding dress silk had saved his life. They went on to have 6 children, 15 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren.